With everything that's been going on recently, a little bit of Lego therapy has been a great thing, and luckily for me, a friend of mine picked up the Tokyo-themed architecture set for my birthday Christmas present from last year when we weren't able to go up and visit friends and family, and I finally got around to putting it together. I haven't been feeling too much into doing art recently, which is probably a bad thing since that's exactly what I want to be doing. So I read a tip somewhere that said something along the lines of, if you're feeling art blocked, to make something super simple, and I decided to do just that, only I decided to do it 3 times. At some point in time, I had gotten a gift from a friend that was watercolor pencils, which I've never used before, so I figured I would finally get around to using those for the first picture that I made. I found an image on Instagram or Pinterest, which was just a torii gate out on the water, and I was like, well, that would be really simple to make, so that's what I made. I did decide to tape down this page, and I think it's important to do that for watercolor because if you don't tape it down, the water can cause the pages to curl. And one of the things I've learned, so I was having some issues with masking tape pulling up and damaging the sides of papers. If you tap it on something like a towel a few times to get rid of some of that stickiness, you won't have that problem, or you'll have less of that problem. So it's been a long time since I've worked with watercolor pencils, and I never really got into the techniques that you could use in order to actually use them effectively. So I just kind of went with a gut feeling on this to see if I could, what I could do with it. And I ended up going dry pencil on dry paper to draw, and then used water on top of it to kind of blend it together. This didn't work the way that I had anticipated it doing, mostly because I just had I had no idea what I was going into. I did manage to get something that I liked, but ultimately I would probably do this a different way if I were to redo it. It was really just a learning experience. Because I wanted the sky to be a lot lighter than the water, I went in with white first to try and kind of create a blending medium that the blue could go into. The blue did not take well on camera, but it is there and it's very, very light. And I went with that for all 3 of these pictures that I made. So I decided to do the exact same picture over again, only this time using watercolor pans rather than watercolor pencils. I am far more comfortable with these than I am the watercolor pencils, so I expected reasonable amounts of things coming from this particular picture. So the traditional watercolor pans didn't give me any trouble, but I decided that the third painting would be with something I got as a gift. Again, I think I mentioned in passing that I really wanted some of this, and lo and behold, it showed up at my door thanks to my spouse. And this is, according to Google, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, gouache. And it is essentially a watercolor paint that is just a little bit thicker. I had never used it before, not in this capacity anyway, and I was very curious to see how it would work. One of the things that I was pleasantly surprised with was how opaque these paints are. I think you can actually thin them down if you want, but I was just as they are, I was just very pleasantly surprised that they covered up and took very quickly. They were very thick paints. My least favorite thing about these paints is they actually go into a bigger palette, but the palette itself doesn't have any real way to secure these little bundles of paints, which is why I didn't open them all at once. I have seen posts about these paints in these palettes drying out very rapidly due to the fact that there's really no seal on them like you would have in a tube. Very disappointing, but we'll see how it goes. I did manage to use some plastic to cover each one individually, so the next time I pull them out, I shouldn't have dried out paints. You can always use water to reconstitute them, but obviously I don't know how well that works over a long period of time. Also, I guess I should mention this, that I absolutely positively hate working directly from palettes if I don't have to, especially in paints like this. Watercolor pans are a little different because they are solid and they're easy to clean, but paints like this that the paint can, the other colors could sink down into each individual square is something that really bothers me, so I was pulling out paint onto a palette so I didn't mix them. And it's just a personal preference, but I don't like mixing colors. I decided to go with the sky first this time because I didn't want to open up another palette for a darker blue, which I will later, and mix in the white, the blue. Initially, I wasn't quite sure how to mix these paints effectively on the palette, and I found very quickly that these paints take wonderfully to water, and so I would put the paints on the canvas and then use water to mix them, and it worked out great actually. I should note that I tried to mix each little square when I opened them because they had been sitting for a long period of time and the paints themselves had started to separate, so I wanted to mix them. I really should have done the ripples in the water last and not first like I did. I wasn't thinking when I put that red down there, but I managed to, I think, get it to a point where it looks okay, even though I shouldn't have done that. I should note that the white actually shows up very well on the white watercolor paper. It is a brighter white. Something to think about. Once I was done with each of the paintings and they were dry, I opened up some ink and signed each of them.